It's more than 20 years since Adrienne Lyle began learning serious dressage from Debbie McDonald, one of the greatest Americans in the sport and the first dressage rider from the USA to become World Cup champion. I'm Ken Braddock, a correspondent covering Olympic horse sports who first met Adrienne when she was cleaning tack and learning about dressage from Debbie at the Thomas family's River Grove farm in Idaho 2 decades ago. As I followed equestrian sports around the world, I've seen Adrienne sitting beside the competition arena in Germany, studying what made the Europeans so dominant in dressage for so many years. Since then, her resume has 3 Olympics on 3 different horses, including the historic achievements on Salvino of silver medal at the Tokyo Games after silver in the Tryon World Championships in 2018. Adrienne now has the opportunity of multiple prospective horses to choose from in a bid for a 4th Olympics in her home country in Los Angeles in just 3 years. The possibility of such choices, rare anywhere in high-performance dressage, is the result of a partnership of Adrienne as a top rider and an amazing financial supporter in Heidi Humphreys, a successful Florida entrepreneur who has made astounding investments in horses and equestrian sport through her Zen Elite Equestrian Center. We talked with Adrienne as she prepares to leave for Switzerland and her 2nd World Cup final. In another week or so, you'll be at the World Cup final in Basel, Switzerland, the first week of April. Only your 2nd World Cup final. And on Helix, the horse that you took to the Olympics. How are you feeling about that?
I'm really excited about this. I had a great time in 2019 when we took Salvino to the World Cup finals. It was a really cool experience. We don't get experience here in the U.S. to have kind of indoor shows like that, and so that in itself is a really exciting environment to ride in, and I'm really proud of Helix and where he's come in the past year together. So I'm looking forward to having a chance to represent our country in yet another World Championships.
It looked to me, not being a trainer or a rider, but it looked to me like you've made quite a dramatic difference in that horse in a year. How would you describe your journey with that horse?
Yeah, I think everybody knows that, the challenge with him has been getting the self-carriage and getting the longer neck. He's by nature kind of short in the neck and likes to go that way. So that's been something we've definitely been working on. I've been very open about the fact that we're working on it. But I do think it's improved a lot, and I think it will continue to improve.
This horse, of course, is owned by Zen Elite Equestrian. What other horses do you have from Zen Elite that you personally are riding?
Yeah, we've got some great upcoming ones in our barn. The youngest being Orion W, which we just purchased this last fall, who is turning 6 years old, who I have not competed yet this year. I'll probably wait and bring him out in the fall. Then we have Zaunkönig, who is a 7-year-old stallion this year, and then Husman's Top Gun, who is 9 this year, who's doing the developing pre-St. George. And then Helix, obviously, and then we have Lars, who will be back in the fall. We're resting him this season, but so we've got an exciting string.
I was going to say, everybody always jokes about the fact that Isabel Worth has this string of horses, and when things, as she herself says, they're not always world beaters, but they keep her in the limelight.
Yep.
You've got these 4. You could have 4 horses doing Grand Prix ready for Los Angeles 2028. Is that a reasonable assumption?
I mean, that would be the dream, and you never know at what speed they're going to develop. You never know who's going to peak when, and so, but just to have 4 of the really quality horses to even have the chance to bring them to that level is super exciting. To have that kind of depth and to have an owner that supports that is just totally my dream.
How did you end up with the relationship with Zen?
We got in contact after the Tokyo Olympics through a mutual friend, and we just kind of started chatting a little bit, and Heidi just was such a cool lady. I could tell I really liked the way she thought about things. I liked her positive energy, and I really related to just honestly her love of animals. She is a horse lover and she is an animal lover, and that was very evident in talking to her. And so as we kind of got talking, she brought up the idea, well, that maybe she would be interested in finding a horse that I would ride for her. And I said, absolutely, that sounds great. And so it just started with the one horse, and then from there the partnership has just really developed, and she's so enthusiastic about everything and super supportive of all the big goals, and it's been a wonderful relationship.
Do you ever talk with her about the fact that I remember the first time I met you was in Idaho, way back when you were a working student for Debbie McDonald. You've come a long way since then. You've now done 3 Olympics on 3 different horses. I mean, that's really quite and silver medals at both World Games and Olympics, which is a remarkable achievement. Do you ever talk about that?
It's when you put it all together like that, it almost seems surreal. It really, I mean, if you had told me that when I was that working student cleaning tack in Idaho, I'm not sure I would have believed you. But I've been so lucky to have incredible support from the McDonalds, from the Thomases, from Betsy Giuliano, from everybody along the way, all these owners that have, supported the journey. And I just feel so lucky to be doing what I'm doing, honestly.
And of course, the horse on which you made your reputation to a large extent, not totally, because you had ridden Wizard at the in London, but Salvino. I was looking last night. You have you started that horse when he was in 2015. I mean, that was when you first got him. An amazing. And so this is not like you bought a made horse, or the people who bought the horse. It was not a made horse. You spent almost 2 years getting the horse ready for competition. What was that like, and how much has that helped you do what you're now doing?
Tremendously. I mean, Salvino is just, don't have enough words to describe what an amazing animal he is, and our partnership was so incredible. I think he taught me a lot of things, but above all else, I think he reinforced that if you believe in a horse and you feel something in them, like, stick to it, take your time, don't give in to any outside pressure. There was a lot of grumblings of, well, why are she showing she bought this expensive horse? What are they doing?
Right.
That you have to just put all that aside and really stick with what you believe is the best timeline for that horse and keep believing in it.
Now, of course, you have these other horses. Do you have the same belief in those horses that you had in Salvino?
I do. They're all very different personalities, and it's always really interesting to kind of see, like I said, when they peak, how they develop. 1 year, one of them might be, it's their year. Everything goes great. They're winning everything. They're in the ring. And then maybe another one, you just say, you know what, this isn't his year. He needs to stay home and train,
right.
And then the next year they come out and they're ready. And so that's why having depth is so important, and having an owner like Betsy was and like Heidi is that really trusts my gauge, I guess, on their training and what I think is right for them in the moment, and is willing to stick with it through that journey and give them the time they need to come out when they are ready.
Because it's very unusual in the United States for one rider to have this many horses. I think at the moment, Alice Tarjan, with her string of horses, that she has this incredible eye for picking young horses. But I don't know of anybody else who has this kind of. Do you know of anybody in the U.S. that has this kind of string?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. No.
Yeah. Does Heidi at Zen? Does she sort of? I mean, this is an amazing commitment that she has made
huge.
To American dressage.
Yes, huge. And I think what's so fun about her for me is that she is obviously hugely invested in me and my horses, and she also is invested in the bigger picture of the sport, and how can we make the sport. She's a businesswoman, outside of horses, and I think that always brings an interesting perspective to it as well, as to how can we grow the sport as a whole in the U.S., how can we support the grassroots levels, how can we support upcoming riders, how can we support high performance riders, and she's really interested in all those aspects of it.
And of course she did something very unusual here during the 5-star, was by having essentially a mid-competition concert
Yep.
with a well-known popular artist from the 80s that was obviously a hit with the spectators.
Yeah, she's been working with Murray Kessler, who's been great with that, trying to get new ideas, and I think she's been to the jumpers and kind of saw like, wow, what a production they do over there. What can we do on our side to help raise the bar a little and do something fun and different, and maybe bring in some people from the general public that maybe wouldn't have come because they weren't dressage enthusiasts, but now maybe they are because they came to see a show,
Right. And of course, in another couple of years, we'll be out of this facility and we'll be over at the main facility. How do you feel about that?
I think if it can be what it's supposed to be, I think it sounds great. I honestly am not that knowledgeable about I know what I read and I know kind of what I hear, but I don't know probably the whole story about everything. But just from looking at the plans, if it all actually works out like they say, I think it looks like a nice showground.
Yeah. And also, I personally sort of feel very strongly, I like the idea of there being jumpers and dressage all together. And we have some of the best jumper riders in the world right down the street here. So
I think that would be more of a European kind of international feel, and it seems like luckily we've almost outgrown this place. The sport keeps growing, I think, and so the fact that they're looking to expand.
Right. Now, do you consider yourself more of a rider or trainer or a combination, because you have other students that you are regularly training?
Yeah, definitely both. I'm really passionate and I really enjoy both. I am equally as committed. I have a small group of students, all of who have high performance aspirations and are completely dedicated to this sport and, making this their career and their living and wanting to do things the right way. And I think that's a really fun group of people to be surrounded by, because it's just, you feed off that enthusiasm and you feed off that desire to be better. You're always watching each other and trying to improve your game. And so that's, for me, a really fun environment to create in our barn. We spent a lot of years kind of cultivating this. I think it was Simone Biles who said lift. It was something like lift as you rise or lift as you climb, or something about her belief in bringing along students essentially, as you're at the top of your sport. And I really believe in that. And I think that's really important for our sport, and it's also something I really enjoy doing.
And of course, Simone is one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, she's incredible in so many ways. She's a huge role model and person to look up to.
Of course, you had a mentor in who now, because of age and family and the rest of it, now is spending more time in Idaho. Mm-hmm. But what sort of an impact has that had on you? Because you were with her essentially for 20 years.
Yes. Yeah, I've been with her for, over half my life, which is kind of wild, and for sure a majority of my adult life. And she was very much a role model in that kind of belief, because she did not have to take me under her wing, and she did not have to give me all these opportunities and travel the world with me after she retired and devote so many years of her life to building up my knowledge and my experiences. And same with the Thomas family. They didn't have to come along and support another upcoming rider. They'd already gone to the Olympics and the World Games, and they'd already have this whole career. But that whole situation was just incredible because they chose to.
Right.
And even when she was still competing, she chose to take time to coach me and train me and mentor me, and that's not always an easy thing to do when you're trying to focus on yourself in your competitive career. And so I have huge respect for people that choose to do that.
Of course, and you're the exact opposite of her. She's sort of like 5 foot nothing, and you're
a little more than 5 feet,
more than 6 feet. And what was it that made the match, if you will? What made it work?
I think, again, she's a person that is very obviously horse first. Love the horse first. Everything has to be done in their best interest, and that was a training philosophy that I really aligned with. And then I've said it too, I think the fact that she was so small was great for me in my career, because I'm tall and I'm strong, and I could have easily used my strength. I think if I'd been put in a program where that was okay, or that was taught to use my strength, but she always said, I'm 5 feet. If I can't get on and ride it easily, then you haven't trained it right. And so that was something that really resonated in my head, that obviously I don't want to ride strong, but the fact that if she can do it, being this tiny petite lady in a way where these horses are soft and they're willing and they're happy, that's the way it's got to be done.
Of course, and she became the first and still only one of 2 Americans to ever win the World Cup final, which is remarkable, everything considered.
Yep.
Yeah. The what do you think of dressage is going through to put it mildly, a tempestuous period right now? What are your views of sort of what's going on and what the future is going to be for the sport?
It is not an easy time, I will say for sure. Especially, if you're competing at the top level, you are the target for sure of a lot of this. And I think even if I'm trying to think of how to word this, I would say I don't think there's a person in this planet that doesn't want the horse welfare to be good, that doesn't want the riding to be good, that doesn't. So I don't think there's anybody out there saying, no, we want to support bad riding, we want to support rough riding at all. I think where it gets really tricky is the people that I think hurts the most are the people who are trying to do it right. I think if you're a rough rider and you're mean to your horses, I don't think you really care if somebody calls you out on it, because you have that personality, But if you're this rider who's truly dedicating your life to try to do it correctly, to try to do it right, and something is taken out of context for a second and slammed, I think that really hurts, because you truly in your soul are trying to do it the right way.
How do you overcome? I mean, this is obviously a very difficult. Right now is very difficult for dressage, more so than the other sports. How does one overcome this? And do they need to be changes in the sport or whatever? I don't know.
I mean, for sure, I don't have the answers for the overall, how do we fix this problem? But I think we need to keep, as individual riders and trainers, doing the best we can, doing right by our horses. My goal is I want to go to bed every night knowing I did right by my horses. I treated them fairly. I treated them kindly. I trained in a way that I am comfortable with, that I believe was right. And at a certain point, all you can do is do what you believe is right and stick with it, and hope that, I think, that will be seen and things will come around, and to try to continue to teach the next generation the correct way to do things.
There's Americans, particularly you dressage riders, have a very good reputation. I would say that I get asked all the time in Europe about the gentle with the horses. Obviously know what they're doing, because you've got an Olympic and a World Games silver medal, so obviously there are people who know what they're doing. Is this sort of peculiar to America, do you think? I mean, this is the sort of impression I get.
Yeah, I think that has been a kind of not a symbol, but I think American riders have been known, a hallmark, exactly. And I think that's wonderful, and I think that's something we need to continue to try to portray. And I think there was a lot of people that influenced to kind of get that stamp on the American riders. And I do agree with that. I think when you look at a lot of our top riders, they're beautiful and correct and classical and soft, and their horses are happy, and that's something that we want to celebrate and promote and continue to try to make the legacy.
Now, of course, there is no coach for the American team. It has not been for some time, and you have this very unusual situation where I think the riders are helping one another. How does that work?
Yeah, I think there's riders helping one another. We have Christine, who's the
chef to keep,
who is holding training sessions. And for me personally, I want to just in life be the best rider I can be. That's my end goal. That's always been my end goal. When I was a kid, people said, "Oh, do you want to go to the Olympics?" I said, "That's probably not in my cards, because I live on a farm," but I just want to be the best rider I can be. And to do that, I want to continue to get knowledge from every great rider and trainer in the world I can. And so that's kind of where I'm enjoying, soaking in little bits and tidbits of information from anywhere I can, and applying that and figuring out little ways to continue to improve.
how much I remember one of the first times I sort of saw you in Europe happened to be at a Munich, and you were sitting beside the ring day after day watching the Germans ride. And I asked you why you were doing it, and you said because they're so accurate. They know exactly what they're doing. And of course, dressage is a sport that requires accuracy. What have you... Do you learn much from the Germans, the Dutch, the Danes, the Brits?
Absolutely. I think with horses, you are learning obviously constantly. And like growing up, I rode Western. I worked with an Arab trainer. I did this whole gauntlet of different things. And even that, you learn something you can apply from every single discipline. So I think you definitely learn something from watching each country. They each have their own little style. And even if it's one little like, oh, that's so interesting, look how they did that, and then you go home and you see if you can apply it to your horse, and you never stop learning. So every chance I get to sit and watch, I'm still there.
Do you have a hero in any equestrian sport, and if so, who is it?
Well, Debbie, honestly, she was my hero growing up, for many reasons, and then became my mentor. And I think she is not only an amazing rider and trainer, but she always held herself to such high standards of integrity throughout her whole career. And I think that's really admirable.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
I really appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Ted.